right, so hello and welcome to the webinar. My name is Josh McDaniel and I work with the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center. In a few moments we'll start the webinar on some recent research on prescribed fire use, or a national survey that was done on prescribed fire use that Mark Melvin is going to be presenting. And he's also going to be talking about the Coalition of Prescribed Fire Councils as well. First, I want to make a couple quick announcements, just as usual, to point out that this is an ongoing webinar series, and it's sponsored by 3 organizations, and that's the Joint Fire Science Program, the International Association of Wildland Fire, and the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center. And encourage everyone to go on there and check out the resources that each of those organizations has been producing and providing. As part of the webinar series, there's one more webinar scheduled coming up this month, and Stacy Drury on October 18th is going to be giving a presentation on the IFT DSS system, the Interagency Fuels Treatment Decision Support System. And you can register for that on the Advances in Fire Practice webpage. The link is right there. If you can't type all of that in, just Google Advances in Fire Practice and it should take you there, and the registration is right up at the top. Okay. Also want to note that IAWF is going to be sponsoring an international symposium on smoke in Washington, D.C. in the fall of 2013. It's a ways off right now, but you can start planning for that if you're interested in those types of topics. All right, now on to today's webinar. I'll introduce the speaker in just a second, but I want to let you know how questions work. We encourage you to get your questions in early. The quicker you get the questions in, the farther up the queue it is. And you'll see in your control panel to the right, there's a box that says questions. You can type the question in there, and at the end of the presentation we'll have a Q&A period, and we'll read those questions out, and Mark will respond to them. Also, I want to note that the webinar is recorded, so there is a recording of the webinar is available. It usually takes a little while to get it up after the webinar. We upload it to the Lessons Learned Center's YouTube channel, and the link to that will be on the Advanced Fire Practice page, right where all the registration information is for the webinars as well. So if you know of someone who might be interested in the webinar, you can pass along the link and they can view it whenever they would like. All right, so let me introduce the speaker. Mark Melvin is employed at the Joseph W. Jones Ecological Research Center at Ecological, located in Newton, Georgia. He has over 20 years of private land management experience in the South and 100,000 plus acres of prescribed fire experience. At Ecological, he works with conservation management and education staff to promote the appropriate use of prescribed fire. Some of his outreach efforts include hands-on prescribed fire short courses, university courses for undergraduate and graduate programs, private landowner outreach, and partner projects with many natural resource management agencies. Over the last 6 years, Mark's primary focus has been working with the prescribed fire councils at state, regional, and national levels. He's the past chair, current vice chair of the Georgia Prescribed Fire Council, and the current chair of the Coalition of Prescribed Fire Councils. So with that, I will hand it over to Mark.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you for the opportunity to present on both the fire survey and to finish up with kind of an overview of prescribed fire councils and the coalition. So with that, we've got a lot of material to cover, and I'll just jump right into it. The 2012 National Prescribed Fire Use Survey Report was a joint effort is a partnership between the National Association of State Foresters and the Coalition of Prescribed Fire Councils. It's the first official publication from the Coalition of Fire Councils, and it can be found on our website, which is www.prescribedfire.net. That's the coalition website, and it's right there on our home page, and it's also embedded in the links and resources. So you're welcome to visit that site and download a printable copy for yourself. I do need to recognize, I feel like I need to recognize the state forestry agencies. Without their cooperation, this venture would not have been possible because they're really the ones that provided all the, and also the technical and financial support of the Jones Center, of which I'm employed. A little bit on the background. I think it's important to know how this all came about. The national wildfire data has been collected for decades, and there's good data sets for that. But on the prescribed fire side, there really aren't any national data sets. It just, that information doesn't exist, other than a few federal agency reports that are specific to public lands. And so in my travels for the last few years, the topic of how much prescribed fire is being used in discussions and meetings that I attended, across the U.S. and how was a critical missing piece when we were addressing EPA and state air quality and smoke management concerns and impacts, as well as other policy and regulation affecting prescribed fire. And honestly, this was a project that I had been wanting to do for about 2 years, and just felt like it was long overdue. So where does one start to get an initiative like this off the ground? Prescribed fire is really managed at a state level, typically through the state forestry agency. So it was my belief that this was the group that could provide the best information available to develop a national counting of prescribed fire activity. And the prescribed fire community had already had a good working relationship with the state forestry agencies, and also with NASF, the National Association of State Foresters. So in early January of this year, I attended the NASF Fire Committee's biannual state fire chiefs, managers, and supervisors joint meeting that was held in San Antonio, and was able to reach an agreement with NASF Fire Committee to go ahead and move this initiative forward, and along with the support of the 50 state forestry agency reps that were in attendance. So the marching orders were, to move ahead and conduct this first comprehensive national prescribed fire use survey. Upon my return from that meeting, and having some time about some elements that would add to this survey, I contacted Stephen Pine to inform him about the project, and he was pretty excited, and he felt like I did at the time that it was overdue, and I asked him to do the forward, and he agreed, and which I was very pleased that he did. And so he used, and you're looking at a map here on the screen. That's Sargent's 1880 U.S. Census map, and this is really the first comprehensive look at fire on in the United States. It's the first record that we have, and he used it as a starting point in history. And it shows fire activity in the settled area. So there was areas that are in white were not settled at the time, so the infrastructure was not there to capture any fire use that was going on at that time in 1880. But to quote Stephen Pine, it was clearly a country full of flame. So a lot of active fire use being used in the late 1800s. One interesting note is, if you look at Florida, you can see Florida is almost cut off there, the peninsula about halfway down, and that southern part of Florida was uninhabited at that time. And interestingly enough, Florida reported 105% of the state burning annually, and one might question their math to come up with that, but those that have burned in Florida know that it's possible to burn the same acres more than one time in a calendar year. So there was a lot of fire that was happening on the ground in Florida at that time. And the forward also linked the developing cohesive fire strategy to the 1911 Weeks Act, which was what created the infrastructure for a system of fire protection from the federal perspective by encouraging states to establish forestry agencies and provided federal grants that assisted them to do that. And so that act is really what shaped the modern day state agency system of fire management that we have. So how did we do it? Well, we developed a survey, and that was approved by the NASF Fire Committee as the survey that we would submit, and that was submitted through them to the state forestry agencies, and they filled out the survey and returned them to me, and I compiled all the data and did all the analysis. But the questions really, the important thing is the questions really focused around three core themes, and that was prescribed fire use, state programs that were used to manage prescribed fire, and identifying impediments to fire use. And in this map, figure 2 here, shows how we broke the United States up into 3 different regions, and those are the NASF regions, and those are the ones that are consistent with the developing cohesive strategy. So we wanted this information to be in a format that would have some use in the cohesive strategy. And all the responses that were received were used and compiled to create a national data set as well as regional data sets, and to help identify similarities as well as any differences among the regions. So the actual impediments we'll talk about a little bit later, but it needs some clarification. This is basically what happened is all of the questions that were submitted or were asked were either a yes or no or fill in the blank. The one question that the states had kind of the freedom to express any kind of personal concerns or interests thereof were with the impediments. So they were asked to list the top 3 impediments in their state to prescribed fire implementation. And so I received those kind of in their words. And from that list, I began to break them out and to compartmentalize them. And what I did is I came up with these 9 different categories that are on the left, starting with capacity concerns, weather concerns, etc. And so I was comfortable without any interpretation that all the responses would fit into one of these categories. And so that's how that information was looked at. And maybe I should have picked a better term to describe it. Capacity and resource concerns that's been the only confusion that I've received any feedback from. But capacity was really limited, and it was personnel and equipment kind of issues, and resources was financial. And so both of those ultimately are capacity concerns, but that was the way that I broke it out, and that was the way that they're described in this report. So based on the results, what we found is that in figure 3 here, there was a total of 20.2 million acres that were treated in 2011, and you can see that agricultural uses came in at 61%, so there's more agricultural burning that occurs on the landscape than silviculture. And then if we look at it at a region level, in the Northeast, and that's in figure 4, a total of 490,000 acres were treated, and the lion's share, 80%, is for silvicultural purposes. Likewise, in the South, in figure 5, the South came in at 10.3 million total acres, and 63% of that being forestry related. Figure 6 shows the West. The West came in at 9.4 million acres, and you can see that Most of that was agricultural, 8.4 million acres, and that was one of the strong regional differences that came out of the actual prescribed fire use results. Figure 7 shows the activity by region. That's from a national perspective, and you can see that most of the fire that occurred in 2011 occurred in the southeast and in the west. Figure 8 is forestry activities by region, and again, support data that was turned in from the fire use. You can see that the southeast burns more than any other region forestry, with forestry interests. And figure 9 is just the opposite and supports the data that the west burns 8.4 million acres of agricultural land. So the west was the primary burner there. This is just a map that shows a very coarse gradient of acreages, and how we came about this is we looked at all the acres that were turned in and where the most significant breaking points, the biggest gaps between the acreages. That's where we used a histogram to do that, and that's where that came up. And we can see that 4 states burn more than 1 million acres. 3 of those are located in the southeast, and 1 in the western region. This was actually a map that the state foresters came back to me and asked that we produce, and this was just purely forestry acres by state, and again, the acreage gradients are a little bit different, but that's where the most significant breaking points were. And you can see that it reflects the data that the southeast burns more forestry acres than the other regions. And there are again, the 3 states that burn over 1 million acres show up on that map as well. This was just a kind of a neat visual. The green represents forestry acres, and the tan is agricultural by percent. So you can glance across the country and see, and if you look at it, you can see that the east is largely green, and the west more of the tan. So that just is another way of looking at the difference between forestry and agricultural practices. Moving into the state programs, Figure 13 is there are 41 states that require some form of permitting, or there's some authorization process to do a prescribed burn. And so that leaves 9 states, the lighter color blue, that don't have any permit process in play. And Figure 14 is the time that's required to get that permit, and you can see the white states show it's not applicable. The lighter blue is the burner can actually, or the burn manager can actually get a permit the day of the burn. Usually this is typically in real time by either online or by a phone call to the forestry agency. And then the darker blue are states that require more than 1 day to obtain a permit. This was, we wanted to look at cost for burning, and what we found was there were only 8 states that actually charged the fee. Most of those have something to do with an air quality permit or tied to smoke management in some way, but there are some states that require a fee for the burn authorization process. And one of the strong regional differences is all but one of those were located in the west. being from the South and a big believer in the state certified burn management programs and the positive impact they have, we looked at that as well, and you can see the darker blue are the states that have or maintain some state certification program. This doesn't necessarily follow or adhere to NWCD standards, but meets some kind of state requirement that the state agencies have, and in some cases those certification courses are linked directly to liability protection in some way. We were also interested in whether prescribed fire activity was trending up or down. And so what we found, and I was pleasantly surprised, was that only 7 states reported fire acres that were actually declining. So for most of the U.S., the state agencies felt like prescribed fire acres were either stable or trending up. This map shows the prescribed fire councils, and you'll get a little more detailed look and discussion about this in a minute, but there are 25 fire councils in 23 different states, and then the light states that are in various stages of development. The impediments, this is a look at the national ranking, and what we found was is capacity, air quality, smoke management, and resources came out as the top 4 impediments and were the most significant, and represented 68% of all the responses that were turned in. And when we look at them regionally, we found that there were some regional differences. Figure 20 there on the top, capacity and weather when compared to the were more significant in the Northeast when we compared to the national ranking. And then permitting and legal concerns ranked in the top 4 and did not in the national average or the national ranking. And interesting, insurance was not even listed as an impediment in the Northeast, and was in the other regions. Figure 21 is the Southeast, and actual liability and insurance actually tie capacity impediment and was significantly different than the national ranking. In both liability insurance and the WUI and population growth were 2 times or more significant when compared to the national responses, which is I found surprising, because in most of the discussions we think about the WUI and being a Western issue, but certainly the population growth that we've experienced in the Southeast is something that the southern state forestry agencies are having to deal with. And interesting, resources and low priority both rank less than the national responses in the Southeast. The West was really interesting to me because it just mirrored the national responses, and it really puzzled me, and I had to really dig into that a little bit. And initially I thought that might be the case because there were more Western responses than any other regions, but actually when I looked at that, investigated a little bit, the West was second in terms of in the number of responses received. So anyway, I think this will be interesting to track maybe through time and see if the West can serve as a barometer for prescribed fire challenges. That'll be interesting. So in summary, in 2012, prescribed fire was used to treat approximately 20 million acres 61%, or the majority, was for agricultural uses and mostly occurred in the West. 98% of all prescribed fire use occurred in the South, East, and the West, and 8 states burned more than 500,000 acres. 82% of the states require some type of permitting. The major regional differences here is permits can be obtained the day of the burn in every southeastern state, and in the Northeast and West, typically more than 1 day is required. Capacity, which is defined as limited personnel, training, private contractors, partnerships, and equipment, was the top national as well as each regional impediment. And so clearly we must find some creative ways to train tomorrow's practitioners today. I just want to leave with this final thought in summary is I've been very fortunate to have traveled the country in the last a lot of successful programs on the ground, and I always try to walk away having learned something. And what I've realized just last year is that all successful programs, no matter where they're located in the U.S., really have 3 things in common. There's a true collaboration. That group, no dominating agency, or there's no dominating organization there's a true sense of working together. It's a seamless partnership. And second, the group just does not recognize any barriers. They find ways to succeed, go through the barrier, around or under, but they find some way to get the job done. And only through careful planning and implementation that group is willing to accept whatever risks are associated with using fire, because it's what the resource demands. And those are 3 things, and that's I kind of use that now as kind of a parting observation, if you will, because when you evaluate fire programs across the country, if that program doesn't have all those 3 elements, then you can that's really where you need to focus and put your work in. So collaboration, I think, is a good segue into prescribed fire councils, because their business is about building partnerships around prescribed fire use. So I have prepared a kind of a brief overview of the coalition and prescribed fire councils. There you can see our website, and again the National Fire Use Survey can be downloaded from that home page. So what is a fire council? In its simplest terms, it's a passionate, committed group of prescribed fire practitioners that come together and work together as that seamless partnership that I described earlier. Although councils have different mission statements, they all have these 3 elements woven into that mission in some shape, form, or fashion, and that is they work to protect the right, they encourage the use of, and they promote public understanding of prescribed fire. The primary focus, and I think this is the greatest strength of prescribed fire councils, is that they can effectively build partnerships around fire. Other issues can divide us, but fire unites, and we can bring together, we do bring together federal, state, and private interests all at the table, and we can resolve issues with fire use. So one might ask, why do we need fire councils? simply, when we look at the historical fire regimes and the current condition classes, there's no part of the region of the U.S., there's no individual state that's meeting their current fire needs. And honestly, the challenges are greater than that we face are greater than any single agency or organization can address. There was a time when we could work within a state, or you could work within an organization or an agency, and work to resolve issues. But there's some issues that we can't address alone, and it's going to take us all to work through. Some of this is not a complete list, but some of those overarching, I call overarching national issues. Air quality and smoke management is one. Wildland urban interface and or population growth, public education and perception, insurance and liability, the ecological role of fire, which there is no caveat for fire. No other fuel treatment can mimic fire in an ecological sense. And global warming and climate change. There's a lot of research, a lot of focus being paid to global warming and climate change now. So these are the big ticket items that affect us all, maybe not directly but indirectly, and it's going to take us all working together to address these at a national level. In 2006, there were 6 states that had fire councils, and you can see them listed there. 4 were in the southeast and 2 in the northeast region. And but there was a growing interest. There was in 2007 the revised NAAQS National Ambient Air Quality Standards were released, and there were a lot of uncertainties about what implications that would be. There was the revision process for the wildland, the interim policy on wildland fire with EPA was being revisited and revamped, and so there was a lot of interest and a lot of pulling together. And so in 2006 there was a group of it was a little over 30 people. It was a very diverse group, federal, state, and private, from about 7 different states that came together, and we had a focus group meeting about the idea of creating at that point, or at that time, the idea was that we would create a Southeast Regional Prescribed Fire Council where we could partner some of the state council efforts at a regional level. But in the initial discussions of that meeting, we quickly realized that this was not a Southeast problem. It was a national problem, and if we were going to be effective, we had to address things at a national issue. Therefore, we needed to become a national, and at that time, we weren't officially formed, but we adopted the name the National Coalition of Prescribed Fire Councils. And so we left that meeting with that understanding. There was a scoping group that was defined, or they actually volunteered, and there was, I don't remember the exact count, but it was about 10 or 12 people. We began to work on building a coalition of prescribed fire councils. Well, at that time there were only 6 states, so we couldn't be national in scope with 6 states. So initially that focus was really on developing new councils, and you can see the council growth there in the early years really spiked up to what it is today, and then it's kind of flattened off, I think, the economy, the tightening budgets, and then somewhat some of the air quality issues aren't as pertinent as they were then. Anyway, there's a lot of different thoughts about why the number of states have kind of leveled off, but I think we're positioned for some added growth in 2013 and 2014 over the next 2 years, and we may see as many as 10 states is my prediction to come on in the next 2 years. Nonetheless, this is our membership today as it stands currently, and you can see those. So the national has been dropped. it's the coalition because we are somewhat international in that we have an active council in British Columbia, and then the dark green states are the ones that are currently in various stages of development. I think it's important to at least mention that you know, to be most effective, or at least in my opinion, to be most effective, a council needs to be at a state level to be able to engage, you know, the state leadership at that level. But that said, that doesn't always work, and there are a number of states, California being a prime example, Georgia being a prime example, Florida, where there are regional, either regional councils. In Florida, there's a North Florida, Central, and a Southern Council. They're all established. Georgia actually started as a Southwest Georgia Prescribed Fire Council. We grew to become the Georgia Fire Council. In Northern California, there is a North California Fire Council and a new developing Sierra Council. And Maryland and Delaware are interesting in that they are joining together to form a Mid-Atlantic Prescribed Fire Council. So we have, in that case, we have two states that are coming together. You know, there are a lot of different variations on fire councils and how they establish themselves, and sometimes they grow and morph into state councils. Sometimes that's not the model, and I suspect California will probably track closely with Florida and be comprised of regional councils. You can see Texas is showing no status there. They actually have a network of burn associations, 10 of them in fact, and they've created a parent group, and we're currently working with them, and I think that we're going to see Texas quickly become one of those states that become a member of the Prescribed Fire Councils, but it will be through their Prescribed Burn Association membership. So what is the role of the coalition? You can read up on the top there our mission, but really our goal is to create that one voice. It's by partnering all these state fire councils, regional councils, to be able to come together and rally around these big fire issues and address them at a national level. When we partner together, there's a lot of strength in numbers, and I'll show some examples of that in just a second. The role of state and local councils really revolve around protecting the ability to burn. In some cases, there's actually a right to burn, landowner right to burn. There are laws that provide that. But that work's done by promoting you know, the appropriate use of prescribed fire, promoting public understanding. That fits right back into those mission statements, and promoting safety and training and research in the science, and also in the art. And I think that's what sets us apart from some other groups, is that we recognize that there is an art to the use of fire, and that comes through actual experience. And so mentoring and sharing experiences is very important, because being able to use and apply fire on the landscape is a learned process. And then working with state and local governments, in a lot of cases, fire councils have worked very successfully to improve state and local fire laws and regulations. Of course, promoting fire to maintain specific ecosystems and habitats that wouldn't exist in the absence of fire. You know, burning more acreage can be one metric that states use to gauge their level of success. And then communication and technical transfer. This is typically done at annual meetings. Fire councils usually have at least one annual meeting. Some have a spring and a fall, or at least 2 meetings a year, maybe a summer and a winter, depending on the fire season and where they're located. But a lot of engagement with the actual fire manager on the ground. I just brought up a couple of examples of how that worked. In 2007, the Georgia Prescribed Fire Council really used Florida's 1990 initiative as an example, and we began to engage all of the county commissions located throughout Georgia, and there are 159 counties in Georgia, so it was no minor undertaking. But by January the 1st, the first county adopted on October the 4th. By January of 2008, we had 157 of 159 counties that had signed a proclamation supporting the use of prescribed fire in the state of Georgia. Since that time, Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, Louisiana, and Oklahoma have been doing similar initiatives. Our resolutions were actually put in a binder in a package, and we actually delivered it to the governor during our Prescribed Fire Awareness Week. We have that as an annual event. Most of the councils now have a relationship through the governor's office where there is a Prescribed Fire Awareness Week, or maybe a Prescribed Fire Awareness Month in some cases. But it's an opportunity to go and visit with state legislatures, get in the governor's office, and help promote prescribed fire in the state. So that's a very powerful tool. One of the goals I would like to see at some point is that we could get all the governors to support or sign a proclamation supporting use of prescribed fire, and then that would be an important document, I think, to have to send up to Washington, D.C. So in summary here, prescribed fire councils were relatively new, continue to gain support and growth and recognition across the U.S. Currently, our board members as well as leaders from all the local and state fire councils are really engaged at national, regional, state, and local initiatives that support the continued use of prescribed fire, and we're working every day to accomplish that. I've had a lot of leading, more than, it's been a handful of well-respected conservationists across the country that say the future use of prescribed fire will likely be defined by our success or failure. So I don't have the luxury to fail, but we have to stay tuned and see how it all works out. The real dilemma is the ecological imperative versus societal attitudes and regulation. The solution, as I see, is only solution is to integrate the science, art, and policy to keep prescribed fire as a viable land management tool. And with that, if there's any time, I will be glad to take any questions, and I appreciate the opportunity and for your participation.
All right, thanks, Mark. That was really interesting. It was a wide-ranging coverage of prescribed fire there, looking at research on the use, and then looking at this new efforts addressing the promotion and education and policy aspects of it. That's really, really good. There are some questions coming in.
Okay.
And I want to start. I had a question. I want to start off with that.
Okay.
Since I have the mic, I'll go ahead and take that opportunity. How often is the National Prescribed Fire Use Survey done? Is this the first one, or has it been done?
And I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. No, this is the first time that that we have done it, and as far as I'm aware, it's the first ever survey, comprehensive survey that specifically focuses on prescribed fire use. So it's yes, answer to both. It's the first one, and it's the first survey that we've done.
Okay, because that was my question. Was a trend, sort of, looking at trends. If you were able to compare it to other more regional surveys or something like that.
Exactly, and there was limited time here, there's a lot of material to go over. One of the things that we hope is that there's enough interest in this that we will do it again. We don't know the timeline. I don't think it's something that will need to be done every year, but periodically. We haven't defined what that time scale may be, but hopefully this one will serve as that baseline as we move through time, and and will become more and more important as we do more surveys. And that's a good point, is that hopefully we can begin to see any trends, if they are there, will begin to show up in future surveys.
Right. Okay. Well, let me go ahead. There's some folks have written in some questions. I'll start reading those out.
Okay.
The first one comes from Tom Moore, and he asks, could you describe the specific impediments for the smoke management portion of the air quality smoke management category?
Okay, let me. All of the smoke management and air quality concerns really came in under a kind of groups, if you will, but they were really all relevant to visibility concerns, nuisance smoke, and emissions impacts. And so that would be the regulatory end of things. But basically, all those responses fit into one of those three subcategories. I'll repeat that: visibility, nuisance, and emissions impacts.
Okay, so were the respondents able to differentiate between the different types of smoke management issues?
Only in the context of, and I could have broken it down, even by region. I would suspect that, in the West, emissions impacts are probably going to be, and nuisance are probably going to be, and I didn't look at that scale, would be the primary drivers. And in the Southeast, visibility, particularly on highways and roadways, those are our primary issues in the Southeast.
Okay.
Although air quality is becoming more and more of a concern and an issue that we deal with.
Okay, from a regulatory standpoint.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so the next question is from Chuck McHugh, and he asks if you have any statistics on the escapes from this work. Did you collect any data on that?
We did not, and data on that. Some have that information, and some don't. And I wish that we could. That's one of the phase. One of the bring up in the discussion is, I'm very grateful for the state forestry agencies participated, but I had to keep, this was a prototype study, if you will. We really had to stick to the base. There are a number of other questions that I would have liked to ask, but we didn't want it to become so burdensome or get inconsistencies in the data because certain states measure, maybe record escapes, and then other states don't have that data. It became tricky to kind of analyze that. So hopefully, these type of questions will come up in future meetings and become an interest to the state agencies, and we can add it in future surveys. But that was one that we didn't specifically address.
Okay. I'm trying to remember, but I think NIFC might collect data on prescribed fires and escapes. I'm not sure though. I might have to.
I know that they do on federal and state, but
right.
I'm not so sure on private. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. The next question is from Hannah Spall, and she asks, "How are grassland fires, in other words, prairies, classified? Forestry isn't a good fit, but agriculture doesn't really fit it either."
Yeah, and I guess that was another piece of information that I omitted, and it really is, that's a tricky area. What we asked states to do was report rangeland burning as forestry activity, and then agricultural was in and of its own. It was its own class, and the reason that we wanted to say is that in almost all cases, agricultural activities are not regulated, but forestry and silvicultural practices are, and rangeland was included in that figure. So forestry and rangeland were lumped together in forestry, and then agricultural was just strictly agricultural. And I left that to, we didn't have it defined any more clear than that, so it was left up to the state as how they delineated that and how they kept records. So I don't know that if, for instance, one state would require or consider one type of activity to be agricultural and another state it would be rangeland. I didn't get into that level of engagement with the state. So it was basically how they reported those numbers out, and that's how I received them.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
And you might have covered the answer to this question in this one, but I'll read this one as well. There might be a little bit of differences, but this is a related question. And Steve Norman writes, there's a difference between crop residue fires and rangeland fires with regard to resilience and risk, perhaps less so air quality though. Are both crop residue and rangeland fires under ag fires, and could they be pulled apart next time?
Yeah, we specifically asked the states not to report rangeland as agricultural. Okay. And again, whether they record them internally, if they recorded them rangeland activity as agricultural, I would suspect that that's the way I received that data.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So next question. This is first off, Zachary Prusak says, "Good stuff, Mark. Much thanks." And then, can there ever be an honest discussion at a high political level that compares the costs of prescribed fire versus wildfire suppression?
The coalition. Well, I mentioned we're having our in just a few weeks, and one of the things that we're interested in, and one of the topics that we're going to discuss will be putting together a, if you will, I don't know what we'll call it or what it'll look like. Hopefully we can develop some type of standardized template to capture success stories. In other words, cases, we have not done a good job of selling the successes that we've accomplished, and I think we've got to do that in a more meaningful way. And so what we're looking at is maybe there's an opportunity for the coalition to put together that package that tells a different side of fire use that I think that Zach is trying to allude to, and that story seldom gets told. So we'll have to see what the outcome of that is, but what we would do is we would solicit, again, state agency and the individual fire councils for examples of success stories with fire use, either in firefighter, directly linked to firefighter safety, or either extinguishing a wildfire, whatever the case may be. But that's something that we're interested in, and we see that there's a need for currently right now.
Okay. Next question is from Sid Hall. And he writes, following an escaped prescribed burn this spring in Colorado, the lower North Fork, prescribed burning has been suspended on federal lands in Colorado for the year. I believe it went beyond Colorado as well. Has the National Coalition been involved in the investigation and congressional hearings that have followed? This seems like these moratoriums could be a growing problem following escapes.
Yeah, we have not been asked to be involved in that. I'm not sure what we could do if we were asked, but we would certainly be responsive to any requests that would come from the federal agencies. But that seems to be a position that the federal agencies have taken on a policy issue, and that's their discretion. I can tell you that I've had some discussions with the Colorado State Foresters, and State Forestry Forester, and anyway, that was a very tragic thing that happened, and there's going to be a healing process, and they're working through it at a state level, and we're closely monitoring that, and we're totally supportive of Colorado State Forestry, and we'll continue to do that at whatever capacity we can and as requested.
Okay, and Jane Lopez sort of has a related question about the lower North Fork burn, and that's if you've seen any impact on implementation, because with that ban on prescribed fire, you might not have the numbers yet, but just from talking to people around the country, do you think that caused a big drop-off in prescribed burns if you look at it nationwide?
Yeah, what it's impacted most severely, I think, is impacted Colorado. Outside of that, I think it has impacted some federal agency operations, but outside of that geographic area, I haven't seen any. There's been some discussions and recognition that occurred, but I haven't seen any change in operation or policy outside of that region. Okay. that would impact or influence prescribed fire use.
Okay. Ross Hawk, hopefully I got that right. Ross has a comment, and he says, in Kansas, one of the driving forces for the state of Kansas was the regulatory issue. Annual prescribed burning of large acreages are having an impact on ozone levels in our large cities. So maybe you could just describe in general how that's a problem a lot of agencies face across the country, is working with their local air quality regulatory agencies, and what you learned in the survey that you might be able to expand on a little bit about that.
I can tell you from the fire council, and that's really, I think, one of the best benefits I see for the smoke and the air side is that the partnerships that you can build with your state and local air quality regulators and community. The way the air regulation works is, of course, EPA sets the federal standards. Those standards get handed down to the states. So each state is handed a box, if you will. And so EPA will not tell a state how to stay inside that box, because each state has different industries and different emissions, and it's as varied as prescribed fire across the country. So you really have to work at that state and local level to make sure that you can overcome whatever issues, and fire councils have been really successful at doing that, particularly after 2007. Many states didn't already have a smoke management program. They developed one, and the examples I'm aware of are ones where the state air quality and the state forestry agencies solicited the prescribed fire council, really the leadership of those individual, the steering committees, members, to be stakeholders in the development of that state program. So you actually have the opportunity to be part of, have a direct impact into the development of that smoke management program. And so it's going to vary depending on what state you are and what level of support, but you got to start somewhere, and there I know of many more successes than I do failures with the prescribed fire councils working at that state and local air quality regulatory level.
Okay, that's a good point. Karsten Baumann has a question, and she asks if are prescribed burning activity records from southeastern states available electronically, and where and how reliable are these records?
Yeah, they the Southern Group of State Foresters have produced various reports in the past that have some elements of that. I don't know of anywhere, and I'm sure it probably exists, but I'm not aware of it. I'm not aware of any place where you can go and just get a laundry list, if you will, of fire activity. Typically, if you want that information, you have to go directly to the state forestry agency, particularly in the southeast, the fire chief.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, the information just is and that's what made, I think, this project so important and so unique is that we had to deal with we had information from 50 different state foresters agencies, and Dan Smith, who's the fire director, a great colleague and a big supporter of prescribed fire use, said that as long as he's been the fire director at NASF, that they've never had 100% participation from the states on any surveys. This was the first time. So I think that speaks well to the support of prescribed fire use. Currently, I think as I look across the nation, I think we have more support for prescribed fire than we've ever had, and there's a lot of growing interest, a lot of growing support, and even though the challenges are great, but I think we can overcome as long as we work together, and I think we're seeing evidence of that, all the time.
Right. And sort of a follow-up on that, Zachary Prusak writes that regarding prescribed fire records, not yet, and he's referring to his work in Florida, but we're trying to work on that in Florida in terms of getting it available electronically. And he says it's very challenging to collect and maintain such a database.
Mm-hmm. And to really point out too is that no matter how well a state records prescribed fire activity, what they report out are actual permitted acres. In other words, there's no way that you could go out for each permitted burn to see what that exact acreage was. So, typically a landowner would call in and he requests a permit to burn X amount of acres. So any reporting is based on those authorized acres. In reality, those he may have burned a little more, he may have burned a little less. We take the position that probably evens itself out, in the course of a year. But I think that's an important thing to remember is that any reporting is just based on those permitted acres.
Right. Okay. All right. And so finally, Alan Long. How's it going, Alan? Good to see you here. Has written in with a comment. This is a follow-up. Says, Mark, thanks for the interesting presentation. In answer to Zach's question, the new JFSP call for research includes relative costs of prescribed fire versus suppression costs. So if anybody's out, if there's researchers in the audience, there's a call for proposals there from JFSP on that very question. And so with that, I want to thank Mark for attending. I think he's made a very strong case for the value of prescribed fire councils. So if there's anyone out there wanting to jumpstart your prescribed fire program, I'd say talk to Mark about how to get involved with your local council or how to get one started, how to get your local council connected to the state and regional levels. And look forward to hearing more about this in the future, Mark. Thanks.
Thank you, Josh.
All right, bye everybody. And the recording of the webinar will be up. I'll have it up probably, usually takes me about 2 hours to get it up, so the link will be in Advances in Fire Practice, and you can pass that on. And the other place to look for it, it's the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center's YouTube channel, which you can probably Google and get there. And thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you.